I thought that I would ask each of the students to introduce themselves, just your name, where you're from, maybe tell us whether or not you've declared a major. That would be great. And then if I could start with Ethan, if you would introduce yourself and then maybe pass it off to another student. You guys seem to have figured out how to do that pretty well. So that would be lovely for us. And then I'll kick it over to Steve Cowderer to start us. So
Sure.
thank you.
My name, oh, sorry. My name is Ethan. I live like right outside of DC. And right now I'm in the process of like finalizing declaring poli-sci major and econ minor. And then, sorry, and I'll hand it to Michelle.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I live in Miami, and I'm a math major, and I'll pass it to Carl.
Hi, I'm Carl. I'm planning on majoring in economics with a correlate in maths, and I'm from Paris, France, and I'll pass it on to Shannon.
Hi, I'm Shannon. I'm from Long Island, so not too far from Vassar. I'm an econ major and probably a poli-sci minor.
Great, welcome. Steve Cowderer, class of 1985, parent of a Vassar student 2024. May I kick it over to you for introductions and to get us started?
Yes, thanks so much, Lauren. Thanks so much, Erin, and thanks for the introduction. That's great. Well, it's so nice to meet all of you, and this is a nice small group, so let's keep this super interactive. And we're gonna, I think, start with just quick introductions, and then let's we'll open it up. And again, as Erin said, just raise your hand at any point and ask questions, and hopefully we'll have a bit of a dialogue here. Love, you guys are from 4 very different places: Miami, Long Island, France, Washington. That's great. I'm from Long Island, by the way, so at some point we have to do the Long Island geography thing. So I'm class of 85, and when I was at Vassar, I was an American culture major, which I think today is called American Studies. It's one of the multidisciplinary majors, and my focus was political theory and economics. I was also involved, I was the editor of the MISC, and I played a little bit of Frisbee and just did a whole bunch of other things. But I love my time at Vassar. It was amazing. In terms of how I got to where I am, I'm now at McKinsey. I'm a senior partner in the New York office. When I was at Vassar, I had no idea what I wanted to do, and there was no sophomore career connections, unfortunately. So I remember senior year thinking, okay, what do I do next year? And I just knew I had to pay back some of my student loans, so I said I should probably get a job. So I was a little bit lazy, so I sort of didn't really do a lot on my own, but I relied on the on-campus recruiting, and a couple of banks came, and a couple of insurance companies came, and I was lucky enough to get a job at an insurance company, and I knew nothing about insurance, but it looked interesting. I became an underwriter. That's like someone that assesses and prices risks, and I actually liked it. I was there for a couple of years, but I got bored. And then I said, hey, I probably should go to grad school. And I was actually toying between law school and business school. I applied to both. And I went back and forth. And then at the end of the day, I decided to do business school. I went to the Yale School of Management. And when I started Yale, I thought, hey, maybe I should do investment banking. That was sort of like the rage at the time. A lot of people went to Wall Street. And I know it's still very popular, of course. And in business school, it's 2 years, and you have a summer internship between the first and second year. So I did, my internship was in investment banking. I worked at Lehman Brothers. Anyone hear of it? It was once ago again today. It was actually a really good place at the time. But I didn't really like my summer. I found that I was working really crazy hours, like literally a few all-nighters over the 10 weeks. And then the actual work, at least for me, I found it sort of a little bit boring. It was very finance focused. And it turns out I didn't love finance. So I'm glad I did it for the summer, because I sort of was able to rule out sort of that space, that field, and I did. So when I got back second year, I said, what else is there? And obviously there's a million other things, but a bunch of my classmates were former consultants. And I started exploring consulting, and it looked really exciting. It looked like, like learning about so many things like marketing and strategy and analytics and organization and other things. So I applied, and I got an offer at McKinsey and took it. And I loved it. And when I first joined McKinsey, I still remember saying to myself, you know what, I have no idea what I'm getting into. I'll probably stay for 2 years, or as long as I'm having fun and growing. And of course, it's like almost 30 years later. And I love it. I left and came back. But basically, I find that consulting is a great place to start a career. And we'll talk more about that. I'm going to hand it off to Nick.
Thank you, Steve. So Nick Dinan, class of 2018, majored in economics and Russian studies. And so not knowing what I wanted to do with my life was kind of like an ongoing theme throughout my life. So I came to America to study because you have a lot of freedom of choosing what to major in and like taking different classes and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, that didn't help me zone in or hone in on any particular industry or field. So not knowing what I wanted to do kind of pervaded throughout my thought process. And something that came up that I knew I wanted to do was I wanted something that is collaborative, something that is intellectually stimulating. So I learn, continuously learn, and something that's dynamic. So it's never really the same. And a primary candidate came out was consulting. So around junior year, so knowing that I wanted to do consulting, I kind of focused on breaking into the industry. And I was very lucky to land in Oliver Wyman, where I'm now a senior consultant. So 2.5 years in. And initially, similar to Steve, initially coming in, it's like, this is interesting, but I'm sure I'll find something I really like in 2 years and focus on that. And I was wrong about that as well. So obviously not 30 years later, not yet, we'll see. But don't see myself leaving just yet. And I've been really enjoying my ride so far. And I'll pass it on to Sam.
Hey everyone, I'm Sam McNaught. I'm from Massachusetts, but I live in DC and have for the last 7 or so years. So I do a slightly different type of consulting. So I currently work at a nonprofit as a director of advisory services. So consulting that is focused on state and local governments and providing support to them in creating what we call like outcomes-based contracts. So it's a certain way of building projects so that way we can focus on outcomes related to homelessness or public health or education or more social issues. Before that, I worked for 6 years at Deloitte. So as we talk today, I'll talk mostly about Deloitte and working at Deloitte. And there I also worked in their public sector practice. So my journey has always been focused on public sector problems. I was a poli-sci econ major when I was at Vassar. When I graduated, I knew that I wanted to go into the public sector, but I graduated in 2009, which was a bad time to graduate. And so I struggled a little bit to find where I wanted to be, but lucked out and became a research associate at a nonprofit that focused on food policy. But I really wanted to focus internationally. Both in poli-sci and econ at Vassar, I was focused on the international side of that, and I wanted to work in international development. So I went back to grad school at Princeton, got a policy degree focusing in development. And when I came out, I worked at the World Bank for a couple of years in evaluation. So that was awesome. Working at the World Bank is super cool. But I got a little bit jaded because evaluation is a really great way of understanding how to make projects better, but only if you take the findings from that evaluation and then use it to make a project better. And you don't always have to do that. You can just kind of like leave it on a shelf. So I decided if people are going to leave this on a shelf and not use it when they build the strategies, I'm going to build the strategies. So I decided to go into consulting as a way to learn how to build really good strategies. And that's what brought me to Deloitte. So I worked at Deloitte for, as I mentioned, 6 years, focused on federal clients and nonprofit clients, doing a huge range of different types of projects, a lot in the last 3 years on public health, but ranging from supporting IRS to supporting international clients to CDC. And I will kick it to Howdy.
Great, thanks, Sam. Hey, everybody, my name is Hwadi. Class of 2011, I was a biology major at Vassar. And after Vassar, I went straight into grad school and got a PhD in cancer biology. I think it's, through that journey, it started to broaden my perspective, right, to understand, the policy, business, and technology components of what takes something that you discover in the lab to something that, is actually in the marketplace and actually can make a difference, right, say in a patient's life or in a healthcare system. So after graduate school, I started with a role at Booz Allen Hamilton, focusing on the drug regulatory space, and just certainly learned more about, the sort of intricacies that highly regulated products have to go through in its life cycle. And then after that, I started my current role at Boston Consulting Group as a consultant, again, to, further build my wheelhouse in terms of, understanding and also driving, the scaling of science and technology, right? But also understanding, how to, make the most impact out of any given investment. So at BCG currently, primarily focused on healthcare based on my prior experience, but also having done a broad portfolio of work, in the public sector, financial services, in investments, and also a little bit of technology as well. So certainly seeing a broad range of, different practices in certain industries, and also, having sort of a deeper understanding of how strategies are crafted, how effective organizations are built, and also, how to execute on sort of their particular vision. So, happy to, talk about any element that relates to my lab life when I was at Vassar, right? But also anything currently in the consulting industry, and it's really great to meet you all. So with that, I will pass it to Livia.
Thanks, Wadi. So I'm Livia, graduated in 2010. I was an econ major at Vassar, and I have minors in math and political science. After Vassar, I went into economics consulting for 3 years. Because, they were recruiting at Vassar at the time, and I was an international student, so it was a little bit difficult in 2009 to branch out. After that, I went to business school. While in business school, I decided that I wanted to be in a different area of consulting. So in strategy consulting, to really look at how organizations work and help shape their strategies going forward. So I got an internship at Booz & Company. I interned with them over the summer, and then moved on to start full-time in 2015. So now I'm a senior manager with Strategy End. They've transformed, they morphed into Strategy End after they were acquired by PwC. And yeah, I'm a senior manager with them. That's what I do right now.
Great. Before we open it up, I just want to maybe say a couple of things. One is I just want to say that you're all at a great place. Obviously, Vassar is an amazing special place, and you're going to have so many options, both for your summers, but also as you think about full-time careers. So we just want to encourage you to, find your passion, find your spark. And I'm glad you're here today learning about consulting. Encourage you to do this for, hopefully you were at an earlier panel, and reach out to lots of alum in different spaces, in different industries, just to get a sense of what you might be excited about. For me, I think consulting is incredible, and I do think it's a great place to start a career. But I, encourage you to sort of just look out for different areas that you might be excited about, and then and pursue those. Just maybe a little bit of a lay of the land of consulting. I'm not sure how familiar you are. Assume that you're not that deeply familiar with the consulting industry. The way I like to think about it, there's probably 4 kinds of options in consulting, and they sort of blur. So one set of firms are the traditional strategy consulting firms, like where I work, McKinsey, and I think all of us, Oliver Wyman and the Boston Consulting Group is part of that, Bain, and there's some others, and those are traditional strategy houses, as they're known. The second group are the bigger, we call them the big 4, like Deloitte and PwC and EY and KPMG, and I'd probably put Accenture in there. And these are firms that traditionally have done more process work or technology work. And they, by the way, are now doing a lot of strategy work. And that first bucket, the strategy group, are now doing a lot of process and implementation work. So there's an increasing blurring between the first and the second buckets. And the second bucket, by the way, to mention to Liv's point, many of those firms have acquired strategy firms like Strategy End or Monitor or others. The third bucket would be more boutique firms. And I guess, Sam, where you're at is a little bit like that. I mean, it's firms that are very focused on a particular sector or industry, or functional capability. And there are many firms like that, and they typically are smaller. And then the fourth bucket would be actually internal strategy consulting at a company. So you could work at Pepsi or Disney or Capital One in their strategy groups, or a million other companies, obviously. And those are great careers too. And obviously it's easy to go back and forth across those four buckets, as a few of us have done. So I hope that gives a little bit of a lay of the land. And when we answer questions, we'll probably be talking about our personal experience at our firm. There are different, obviously each firm is different, and each bucket is a little bit different too. So with that, why don't we open it up? And again, let's keep this informal, and anything goes, like whatever you want to talk about, from what we do to how to get a job to how we like it, to anything you want to hear about. Who wants to break the ice?
I have a question.
Sure.
So some of you have experience in like finance, and I was wondering if you could speak to about, what are the differences and what do you prefer about consulting rather than finance?
Who would like to start with that one?
I can give some insights into that. So my experience is somewhat limited. I did an internship in investment banking, M&A, for Lehman Brothers in London. I would say that the differences between consulting and banking, like investment banking in particular, are as follows. So one, in investment banking, you work on deals, so on transactions, right? Like whenever a company acquires another company, or when a company sells a company, you will be working on valuing the target, identifying what the synergies are, and you tend to do kind of like the same work over and over again. So while your topic will be different, I would say that you still go by the same theme and like line of work. You have exposure to probably like the chief like business development officer, or like the chief M&A officer in the companies that you're working for. And most of your work will be performed in Excel, like some PowerPoint as well, and you'll work more with financials. In consulting, your work is going to be not transaction-based, but project-based, and you're going to work in teams, and you're going to be tackling a much greater variety of topics. So the only angle where you may touch on a transaction are, let's say, if you do a due diligence project or an integration project, where you're actually looking post-transaction when the companies are coming together, and you're thinking about how do you actually merge departments, change their value proposition, etc. But in consulting, your work will revolve around solving problems that the company is facing, and that they don't know how to solve themselves, or they don't have the right resources to solve themselves. So that's kind of like on the type of work. I found that in consulting, you tend to work together with your team more, as opposed to working independently and just sharing your results with someone else. There is a greater learning curve with every new project. So you get, I would say, more coaching from your manager on every project, just because of the nature of the work, right? Like there's different topics, and you change clients all the time as well. So I would say like those are some of the differences between investment banking and consulting. Both, I would say, are like great places to start your career, very rewarding jobs, and happy to go into more details as well.
Yeah, and I guess I would echo everything you say. And as I mentioned, I spent the summer in investment banking. I think there's a couple other differences. I do find that banking is, as Libby said, is very, very focused on obviously finance and financials. So if that's super exciting to you, then that's probably a great place to be. I think consulting, to me at least, is sort of somewhat broader. It's looking at all aspects of a business, you know, from strategy to operations to customer experience to organization and logistics and of course finance. So like for me, I like that breadth. So it's a little bit of a breadth versus depth thing. In terms of the lifestyle, they're both pretty intense. To be very fair, you're gonna work very long hours. From my experience at least, and just, you know, some friends and colleagues, I think it's fair to say in general, banking is actually longer hours, although consulting is not 9 to 5. But I think it might be longer hours, whereas I think consulting is more travel. So if you don't want to travel, consulting's probably not a great place. That said, I actually like one of the value propositions for me. I was, you know, pretty young when I joined out of business school, like see the world and like travel and, you know, broaden, and I love that. And that's still the case.
And just a really quick thought based on what you guys both said, Steve and Livia. I was wondering, was there also a sort of a cultural component when it comes to lifestyle? Because I think in consulting, right, I think a lot of organizations are very introspective and, you know, try to basically take that consulting toolkit to apply that to sort of internal lifestyle challenges as well, right? So for example, you know, at my firm, while we acknowledge that the hours are hard, but we also have a lot of structural elements to help teams manage that. And I feel like, you know, I've not worked in finance, right, but I've interacted with colleagues who had. And I think from their experience, they didn't see sort of similar structures or elements that help do that. So I just was wondering if you guys can comment on that element as well.
Yeah, so I would say that, so banking is also a very broad industry, right? So if you talk about investment banking, M&A, generally the hours are much longer than in consulting. And at least in the place where I was, the culture was a little bit harsher, like work hard, play harder, but a lot of the work fell downwards on the analysts because all of the MDs were in meetings until 6 p.m. and then they would come to your desk with something to do at 6 p.m. You had to get it done the same night and send the materials to them so they can review it first thing in the morning. And there wasn't as much camaraderie because, as I said before, it was more of an independent work type of place. So you would do your work and then kind of complete it. You didn't need to work with a team. You didn't need as many reviews. It was much more structured. That being said, there are other areas of banking, such as sales and trading, capital markets, etc., where the lifestyle is known to be better. So in sales and trading, you're going to have a really intense day from, you know, when the markets open until the markets close, and a little bit after that. And same in like capital markets, it's not going to be as intense. And I would say those jobs are actually less intense than consulting, especially as an analyst that's trying to learn. Because in consulting, you're going to have the collaboration, the cooperation, the camaraderie. Your manager and your partners will know when you're pulling in long hours, and they're going to make sure that some of the next days you're going to have maybe like a lighter load. But in the beginning, you will not be proficient at modeling. You'll not be proficient at building decks. You'll have to redo a lot of work. You'll come from Vassar equipped with like good research skills and like the good mentality to work hard. But in the beginning, to learn, you're probably going to have to pull in the hours. That being said, I don't think that there's any job where you go in these days and you don't work hard. But you expect let's say a really high compensation or really broad exposure. It just doesn't work that way, unfortunately, I think. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, and as mentioned, you know, it's a really, something's really collaborative. It's very team oriented, which I love. And it's, you know, we typically, most of these rooms, we're pretty non-hierarchical. So we sort of all in this together. You know, typical consulting team is maybe 4 or 5 people on a project. And we perhaps have different tenure levels and different titles, but really we're all in this together. And in our firm, we have our core guiding principle is called the obligation to dissent. And we literally are in this together. And if any of us disagree with where we're coming out with our hypothesis, we have an obligation to say that. And then we all get together and figure out, you know, what is the right answer here. And I really love that. It's sort of that, you know, all of us coming together create truth in a sense and great answers. Other questions?
I have one. I know you kind of said that depending on the project, it kind of varies what you're working on and what you're doing. But what does kind of a typical day maybe look like?
So maybe we can all answer that because I think it's going to differ a little bit. And it probably differs by day. Who would like to start?
I can start.
You want to start? You're the
Actually,
youngest one.
Nick?
I'll start. So the first phase will be, or the first part of the answer will be pre-pandemic. So usually day to day is, right, it's more like on a week to week kind of basis. Usually you travel. So Monday morning, wake up 4:35 a.m. to catch the plane and then fly into the client site because you want to, to Steve and Livia's points, very collaborative kind of, environment. So you want to like sit with the client and work with them together as opposed to just send them work whenever you're done. So, you fly in Mondays and then Thursdays is when you fly back and then Fridays you spend at the office. So while you're at the client, you kind of build a routine, whatever it may be, right? But it's usually filled with meetings from 8 or 9 to 5 or 6, whenever the client is kind of working, and then you kind of go back to the hotel and then you keep working there, have dinner with the team and keep working there. During the pandemic, it's changed in the sense of, you're not co-located. Regarding the meeting cadence is quite similar. So you do a stand-up in the morning with your team, since you can't be co-located. You do a Zoom call kind of like this. You kind of figure out what there's to do for the day, and then you have meetings with the client or with internal teams to get that work done. And obviously, there's sometimes you have a stand down at the end of the day where you kind of touch base with your manager and whatnot, and then you kind of go from there. That's kind of the large difference in my experience.
And I think the way I think about it is maybe in any given week, there's probably half thinking time, half doing time, right? And I think they're, linked to each other, right? So thinking time are things like, planning things with your team, or, coming up with your hypothesis, meeting with your clients and, generate, questions together, or, synthesize the existing analysis that you've done, right? And doing time is like, you get 5 different spreadsheets that are in different formats, and now you need to clean up in Excel, right, and actually create a workable database to analyze, or actually doing interviews with clients and capture notes, right, so that can inform additional thinking. So I think, like, everybody has said, it's sort of kind of difficult to come up with sort of an archetype day. But I think if I look at any given week, it's probably, and every day, right, the balance shifts based on the constraints that you have, whether you have to travel or whether you have different client meetings. But overall, I would say, like, probably spend half the time thinking about things and half the time actually executing and then doing things and generating output.
So I would echo all of that. In the prior session, I answered the question when, you have a stand-up meeting and then in the morning, and then you have various meetings throughout the day, and you also do your work. I'd say that, to kind of add more color to what Fouadi said, your thinking time means you're in meetings and you're brainstorming with the team, whiteboarding, very collaborative, the most fun part of the job, I believe. Or you're kind of listening to the partners brainstorming with each other, which is especially fun if you're, on a project with 4 partners at the same time, and maybe they're not all in the same meeting when they review the first draft. The doing time means you're either doing slides, which is basically what we share with our clients, or you're building a model which is like analytical work, or you're doing research and that research is either speak to experts from expert networks, talk to people from the company that you're working for to understand how to streamline their work. Oh, sorry, that's my toddler. Or you lost my train of thought there. Yeah, that's about it. I think those are the big buckets of work.
I think, yeah, I definitely echo that. Like, as we work in groups, we spend a lot of time in meetings because you have to collaborate with people. The one thing that I would add that we talked about in our last session is it's consulting, particularly at Deloitte. It's kind of like high school, where your client work can be like your classes. Hi, Lydia's daughter. But it's kind of like your classes. So if you do just client work, you would get straight A's, which is awesome, but that's not enough to get you into college. So you need to do stuff outside of your client work in order to be considered kind of whole and to be performing well. And that can actually be really great because like high school, like even if you don't love all your subjects, you can find something outside of what you do on your day-to-day client work that really excites you. So that might mean that your day could be, say you worked 9 to 6 on primarily client work with 1 or 2 calls about what we call it firm initiatives. Some people call it other things, but it's basically your way of doing work that you're billing for. Like there's codes where you're charging it for, but it's not for the client that you serve, it's for your firm. And that can mean like you are like writing a blog that's about a new thing, like the future of work. Or it could be that you are leading a mentor program for a community group in your community. Or it could be something that's internally focused, like doing a training that you develop and run for your peers or people who are at the level below you. So it's a really great opportunity to work on your client work, build all these cool consulting skills, but also get to delve into topics that you might not get to in your client work, but that really interest you, like refugee resettlement or hunger or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and I guess I would echo that, Sam. I mean, I guess two thoughts. One is, in addition to client work, there is actually always great opportunity to do other things. So it could be training or recruiting or writing an article or doing some research or doing pro bono work. So any or all of those, whatever you're excited about, you could definitely do. But in terms of the core client work, as everyone said, it's usually a mix of sort of like thinking and sort of communicating, and also left brain, right brain. So for example, let's say typical client is for 2 or 3 months. Let's say your client is Target and you try to improve sales for them or improve their sort of their market position. You may spend a couple of weeks on purely qualitative things where you're actually going to Target stores and what we call customer interaction, where you literally are in the parking lot as people come out of the store and you say, hey, do you have 10 minutes to talk about your experience? And you sort of put all that together. You may also go into the store and look at their skewing, at how they organize their different categories of items and how their SKUs look. And then you may go to a competitor like Walmart or go online to Amazon and compare it. But then you also may do some Excel spreadsheets and putting together some pricing models. So it's a really cool mix of qualitative and quantitative. And that's actually what I love about it. And then you all come together with your team, the 4 or 5 other people, and you sort of say, okay, here's what I'm finding from the customers, from the pricing thing, from the SKU, whatever it is that you're doing. And then you put your heads together and say, hey, let's think about what this is saying to us. And then you communicate that by putting together a deck, a bunch of slides, and then meet with the client and brainstorm with them. So it's a very iterative process. It's left brain, it's right brain, very dynamic, and I think really exciting. Other questions?
Yeah, I had a question. So like when you guys are looking at like, I mean, at least now specifically like interns, but like more broadly, just kind of like hires, like what are some things that you look for, like to kind of just separate people from like that like pile that no one really wants to end up in? Like what are some things that are like big, like just highlights that kind of stick with you that stand out?
Yeah, who would like to start?
I can start. So we get a lot of resumes. So there are the basic things, and then there's the differentiating factors, right? The basic things are high GPA, above 3.5, I would say, and then just doing well in your academics. The differentiating factors are people that demonstrate a high level of involvement and energy in various activities that they do in school or outside of school. So for example, people that had an interesting summer internship or somewhere where they've made an impact, people that are active in various like clubs and extracurriculars, because that tells us that that candidate is intellectually curious, they get involved and they go above and beyond in what they do, and that they're going to be a pretty good both team player and individual contributor.
And to add to that, if we just look, for example, like the internship/experiences section of the resume, if you may, something that really helps differentiate yourself is to show that through experiences that you are collaborative, you're a problem solver, you're comfortable with ambiguity, and you also have a sense of being analytical, right? You don't need to be like a math genius to be in consulting, but being comfortable with kind of numbers in order to tackle those kind of problems as well is quite important.
Yeah, and I would just add, I would echo everything said, and maybe two things. One is, the first thing is just how do you get selected to be interviewed? And then we can talk about once you're interviewed, how do you actually get the job? Getting selected to be interviewed is tough because we get, all these firms get tons and tons of applications. So the things that were mentioned, obviously we do look for, first of all majors are really welcome. And I have to say, McKinsey, we have a ton of English majors and sociology majors on American culture. And of course, a ton of STEM majors, the engineering and sciences and math and economics. There's not a values judgment. Like English is just as good as economics and it's just as good as engineering. That said, we do want to make sure that everyone has some quantitative ability. That's important. So if you literally don't like numbers, it's probably not a great job. So we want you to demonstrate that either through, we'll look at your math SAT or see if you've taken some quant classes. But overall, GPA is important. And what mentioned earlier, we love people that are really active on campus. So at Vassar, if you're involved in sports or theater or some of the affinity groups or anything that is your passion and you're like deeply involved in that, that's a huge, huge plus. That's almost as important as having a great GPA, frankly. Maybe as important. So we want to see again that whole mix of the whole person. And that, if you have all that together, you have a good chance of getting selected to be interviewed. And then once you're interviewed, you're sort of all in a level playing field with everyone else. And then it's about how you do on the interview purely. And the interview typically looks for two things. One is the softer stuff. Are you someone that has real empathy? Are you self-aware? Can you communicate well? Can you get along well with other people? So we call that sort of behavioral kinds of questions and topics. And the second is around your problem solving. And that's really the core of a lot of these interviews in consulting. And I don't know if you've heard of the term case interviews, but I think all the firms here pretty much utilize that approach. So we ask you a series of questions, maybe, a problem, a case, and see how you actually can, unpack it and go down, different logic trees and use both qualitative and quantitative thinking together and communicate that to the interviewer. The good news for that is there's lots of prep. So there's a book called Case in Point, which is a great starting point, which talks about how to think about case interviews. And there's there's a bunch of great videos. And each consulting firm, if you go on our websites, we actually have practice cases. But the most important thing for that is just to do as much as you can in case prep and practice, like literally, I'd say a minimum, frankly, of 20 hours, even more, to almost take it as seriously as like a fifth class and really spend a lot of time with people, casing them, you casing them, getting feedback and getting comfortable.
And it's important also, I wanted to emphasize timing, right? You can't prepare your application, apply, and then think about case interviews, right? It's one of the hard part of applying, especially if you're not necessarily at a target school like Vassar. You have to kind of do everything at the same time, right? So let's say you make the decision that you want to aim for applying for an internship in consulting for junior summer. So that would mean that I think recruitment starts around May for some companies like Oliver Wyman and September for other companies like McKinsey. So up to that point, you already need to start putting a plan in, like, what can you do regarding your resume, your cover letter? What can you do regarding, casing? So like learn the steps, read those books, start practicing already, just so when it's time for actual recruitment, you're not studying, you're more just executing at that point.
And then we actually instituted a new screening because we get, we all get so many applications. It's hard to sort of figure out, because it's supply and demand. We wish we could interview everyone, but obviously it's far from, we can't do that. So we created this sort of online video game called Abellis that we give it to every applicant. A bunch of professors from Stanford that developed the GMAT worked with us to develop this. And it's basically you're on a desert island and you have to solve a bunch of things. There's some crazy stuff out on that island with animals and other stuff. And we want to get a sense of your thought process. So we sort of give that to our applicants and then we see how they do. It's the first year we're doing it, so we don't have a predictive sense yet. So the good news is we're actually committed to recruiting ambassadors. So even if you don't score that high on that video game, if you have a great application, you'll get an interview. But I just want to throw it out there that we are going to give that Embellis video online assessment to applicants. Great question. What other questions? Don't be shy. Anything, any topic that's of interest.
I guess adding on to like what we should be doing during our semester at Vassar, what do you think? So someone like me who hasn't really lined up an internship this summer, what should someone his sophomore year do during the summer?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So first of all, just to put it in perspective, so junior year, most of these firms, I think all the firms that are here represented have formal programs. So for next year, I strongly encourage each of you to apply. And by the way, it's really early, like literally in the case of McKinsey at least, you'd apply over the summer, like in 6 months from now. And then you get interviewed in September, and then by October, it's done. You either have an offer or not. And if you have an offer, it's for the, for the following summer. This summer, most of the firms don't have formal summer programs or any summer programs for sophomores. I encourage you to, sort of follow your passion. If you're actually excited about consulting, see if there's like a boutique firm, or see if there's anything where any organization where you could just, engage in analytics, like in problem solving. We love to see that. It could be for like a public interest thing. It could be for a social sector. It could be a Vassar, but we just want to see that you've actually done problem solving and analytics and communication, the stuff that we do day to day over the summer, because we know that it's so hard to get a sophomore job because most companies don't hire. So I don't know if that's helpful, but it's a very broad set. It's, as long as you're doing stuff that is the kind of stuff you'd be doing around analytics and problem solving, we'd love to see that. Other ventures?
Yeah, I would echo that. I think what we want to see in candidates is that they can think well. And so we want to see on your physical resume when we read it, it's like, you did this and like the outcome of that. So this summer, like do anything you want, but be able to understand what you're getting out of it. Like, don't go work at a carnival for the sake of working at a carnival, especially because of COVID. But if you were, like, go work at a carnival and say, like, I went there and I was doing the basketball one to see how we could like optimize like the number of people who don't hit it, or whatever, which sounds really evil, but like say that's what you wanted to do, that's what you do. But the point is, like, do whatever seems interesting to you, do whatever seems fun to you, but be able to get something out of it that is relevant to where you want to go. When I was a sophomore, I worked at I did a part-time internship at a place called Cure Alzheimer's, which does fundraising and outreach for Alzheimer's research. It's not an area that I have ever worked on since. Like, I worked in public health a bit, but it was a place where I could go and get experience with like working in an office, working on outreach, working on analysis of like different segments of the population that they were trying to tap into. And so I was able to build a real baseline. And that was like the first thing that ever went on my resume. And so it's really about like, how do you establish the baseline while getting exposure to something that interests you?
Some tactical notes. So because a lot of businesses maybe don't have like sophomore summer like formal programs, and you might not be able to get paid for your time. Vassar offers grants to cover that. So in my experience, my sophomore year, I worked at the Russian-German Chamber of Commerce in Moscow. And they were definitely not going to pay me. So applied to Vassar, got the grant that took me way farther than, let's say, would have done in New York or a city with a higher living cost. So definitely taking advantage of that as well. And something else I just posted in the the Zoom chat is the Vassar Summer Consulting Initiative. So the Vassar Business Club actually does like pro bono consulting in the summers. I think they started it last summer due to COVID. A lot of people lost their internships, so they did that on their own. And like I got to participate in that as a mentor, and that's a great experience because they go through the motions. You know, you talk to clients, you do analytics, you build decks, and at least one person who worked on there currently is one of the people who got the offer from McKinsey, is going to be working there this upcoming September. So, you know, on a tactical note, if you're interested in consulting and you don't necessarily find any other opportunities, I would also reach out internally, and this Vassar Consulting Initiative seems like a great step potentially.
And one more note there. So there's a lot of alums that have startups, and generally, like, startups have a lot of work to go around, and they would, you know, they have small, you know, tasks like big and small. So you can always like reach out to various alums and see if they have something that you could help with. As a sophomore, there isn't as much pressure to be in a very structured program. So that could help you do some high impact work early on.
Other topics, questions, thoughts?
So like I had one. So like I was when I was like looking into like some of these like the Career Connection like breakout rooms, I was previously in like the nonprofit one because I was kind of like I enjoyed the idea of working for like foundations and corporations and like groups of people that like kind of shared social beliefs with you. And so like I'm kind of asking like how often, if ever, like are you guys able to kind of like follow like something you truly believe in as opposed to just like working and being like, I don't really believe in this, but like it's my job, so I'm gonna do it type of thing. So like is there like a space where you can kind of operate and like things you believe in and still work?
No, that's a great question. And maybe we can all take a pass. I mean, I'm happy to start. And I sort of feel like, I've been able to be fortunate to sort of do well and do good. I mean, sort of repairing the world is the slogan I always use is really important to me, and helping folks. And I feel like I'm able to integrate that with my job at McKinsey, within McKinsey. So for example, I actually do a lot of pro bono work. So I actually do a lot of work with charter schools. And I feel like that's, helping some folks in a really nice way. And we have most of my colleagues, I'd say, do pro bono work in different organizations. And we pay, and we staff it regularly. It's like you could be staffed at Target for 3 months, and the next 3 months could be in a nonprofit organization that you really, believe in and want to work with, and which is exciting. But I think even the private sector work that I do, I feel really good about, for the most part, about helping to build communities, build employee engagement, improve sort of, the organization itself. So I feel like even the core work of what we do, I feel like there's some good there. That said, obviously it's very individual in terms of what you're really passionate about in doing and in helping. And then, it would be great if you could combine it all together, and not always that easy.
And also, let's say if there's something you believe like very much strictly against, let's say oil and gas, and there's a project comes up and they try to staff you on it, you being like, hey, I don't believe in this, I don't want to work with this, you don't necessarily have to be staffed on it. At least in my experience, there are people who would refuse to work for certain industries, and there's enough work to go around. So that was like totally fine. They're just staffed on the project.
So I want to add just a few notes. I'm fully in agreement with what Stephen and Nick said. So number one, although I have not worked, thankfully, on any projects that made me question the type of work, or where I felt I was pressured to do something that I wasn't morally aligned with, I did get this advice, I still remember very clearly, from a business school professor. Try to save up to get your walkaway money early. It is likely that at some point in your career, you may be asked to do something that you don't want to do and you don't agree with, and you're pressured. And at that point in time, you should have the strength and the financial wherewithal to be able to say no. The second piece is there are companies that have a specific consulting focus on nonprofit or education or other components. So for example, the Bridgespan Group is a consulting company that I believe specializes in consulting for nonprofits. So that's a good place to explore. I don't know exactly how they're hiring at this level is, but that's definitely something to keep in mind. And as far as I know, Parthenon, which is now acquired by EY, had a pretty strong education practice. I think that BCG has a strong education practice in Boston. And unfortunately, I don't know about McKinsey, but I anticipate that they also have that. The third is, before you make your decision on your first career, talk to enough alums to understand what their life really looks like in each institution. I love the idea of the nonprofit sector, and I was involved in Vassar Haiti project while at Vassar, and I loved a lot of things about that organization. However, I've also heard from various alums that were in a similar career cluster a few days ago that at least in some of the large nonprofit institutions, the world is pretty hierarchical. They find that they're placed in a specific area of the institution, they're not able to move out. So whatever you do, make sure that you're very informed and that you're truly able to match the impact that you want to make with your organization and the type of job that you're in.
So we should talk about this more. Like, I don't know when we'll time out, but like, Ethan, tomorrow, if you can find me, we should talk about this more. So I have worked in the nonprofit sector. I do consulting that is strictly in the public sector. And within the public sector, I now work for a nonprofit doing management consulting. And in my last role, I was doing public sector consulting. Part of the reason why I have been very intentional about where, like, working in Deloitte's public sector is because of this question that you're asking. It was really important to me to make sure that I was with a firm and doing work that aligned with my values. And so I didn't want to be in a place, one, I just don't care about companies making money. Like, I just don't care. It doesn't motivate me. So I was like, I want to work I want to do consulting because I like the way consulting works. I like the opportunities that it provides for growth, for learning, for things like that. But I did, and like, as opposed to working within one of these organizations or within the government. But I think that within the public sector, there's still, as Nick mentioned, like, you might have Deloitte works with defense contractors, they work with ICE, and there are people like myself who said, I just don't work on that. I don't work on ICE, I don't work on defense, that's not my sector, it's not my space, I'm not interested in it because I don't want to have any moral quandaries with what I do. And so there are ways that you can, even within these larger firms, that you can choose to be within a practice that allows you to work on the types of things that align to your values. I will say that working on nonprofit specific stuff within larger management consulting firms, with the exception of firms that this is all they do, like a Bridgespan, I find that the projects exist. They are really rewarding. They are really interesting. They are not as prevalent as whatever is the main focus. So I worked on nonprofit stuff as my main client work, as well as my like firm initiative work. But as my main clients, I had nonprofits, but I could only do them every so often because as you move within these larger firms, it gets a little tricky because of like, we're expensive. So not every, like, we worked with like American Cancer Society because they're massive, like we weren't working with mom and pops. So there's just a couple of like nuances, but there's certainly ways to make it match your values.
Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Sorry, just a quick add there, right? I think tactically, to Olivia's point about, talking to alum in different industries and understanding these firms, I think, if that's sort of a dimension that's particularly useful to you, particularly important to you, a very probing question to ask is to ask how each organization resolves, controversies, right? Whether it's internal or whether it's something that sometimes spill into the public sphere, right? Acknowledging that within any large organization, there's going to be a collection of different value orientation, right? I think it's more important to understand, when disputes happen, what's the option that the organization give people in terms of where they draw the line, right? And how people are empowered to draw certain lines in terms of, choices that they have and how that impacts their career. So I think, just in terms of what probes that you use to understand that, I think these could be a good place to start.
Great. Other thoughts, questions? Get any topic.
I mean, I do have another one. So like we mentioned earlier, like interviews and like how you look for both like those soft topics and the hard topics. But like, what are some like nice, like good things that like we could work on like going in, other than like those case studies that you mentioned, like maybe more so like the soft topics? Like, what are some like good, maybe not good talking points, but like just good things to exude when you're in an interview?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Ethan. Happy to start. First of all, I know it's a cliche, but just be yourself, be genuine, be authentic, because that's what we want. We're hiring you. We're not, hiring some, person that someone is trying to be. And I'm sure you have so much to bring. So just honestly relax and be yourself. I still remember my first year at business school. I did interview for some consulting firms along with the banking. And I didn't get any offers with the consulting. And I realized that I was just being very stiff and not being myself. And then second year I did well, and I wasn't any smarter, trust me. I just took a step back and said, let myself come through, be light, be funny in some cases, but just let myself come through. So that's my first, sort of suggestion. We also, like at McKinsey in particular, in trying to probe that whole behavioral side, the softer side, we often ask a question, something like, tell us about something that you had to overcome, a challenge, or a time where it was a strange situation, you had to become a leader with a group of people. Like, so try to think about some scenarios, either at Vassar or before, or during your summers, where you could speak to like a little bit of a story about yourself, about how the term I love to use is humble and kind, that you had confidence, did the right thing, and you were a real leader, but not arrogant and not, overly confident. So I hope that's helpful, but I'm sure my colleagues have other things to suggest.
I just want to piggyback off of what you said, Steve. So first of all, totally agree. But regarding be relaxed. But the thing that helped me is be prepared, right? So I know that they're going to ask. I mean, we will never know the exact questions they ask, but they are all going to be a lot like in a certain ballpark. So thinking back to your experiences, whether it's extracurricular, like let's see, extracurricular, school, college, before college, internships, and come up with I don't know. I would the strategy that works for me is 6 or 7 stories that encompass a lot of qualities that you might come up in an interview. So whether it's like Steve said, overcoming hardships, working in a team, overcoming conflict, taking on a challenge, and et cetera, et cetera. Like in my interview, I remember the partner asked me, tell me about a time you had a conflict and failed, right? That happens to everybody. And if you are prepared with a story that's at least adjacent to answering the question, it'll be easier to stay relaxed. It'll be easier to exude yourself, because if you find yourself scrambling for an example of something that they ask you about, it'll be harder to stay relaxed. So, be prepared. Think of stories that really exude who you are, and as well as hit certain things about, being humble, being kind, being a leader, working well with other people, and so on and so forth.
And this may sound strange, but tactically, do practice those behavioral questions too, right? I think there's a specific way to frame those questions. And I think it's very much an acquired skill, if I may say that, right? Nobody feels comfortable talking about themselves in a very structured way, at least, initially when you go into job search. So I found it incredibly helpful to think through your experience and then try to explain those experiences to someone and see what feedback you would get, right? And I think initially it would be really awkward, but I think it's going to pay dividends down the line when you go through the interviews.
One tactical thing that I would suggest, not in a crazy way, don't start skipping classes to read the newspaper, but you should read a newspaper. And so that can be whatever you want to do. I happen to, we all skim stuff on my phone. I skim the titles of 1 million articles a day, but I happen to have subscriptions to New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Washington Post. Wall Street Journal has a shockingly great. Like it's actually a great publication, minus some of the editorials, which I might not always agree with, but like they even pull in some like entertainment stuff. But I say this only because sometimes you're in these case interviews and they're asking you a question and you have no idea what the case is going to be about. It could be about paint drying. It could be about like the manufacturing industry, but just kind of having like a general sense of the world. Like, oh, I don't even have a car, but I know that GM just like decided they were going to go 100% carbon neutral, and they're going to have all e-vehicles, because that was a headline that came out this week. I don't own a GM. I probably won't, but it's something that's like a good context for you if you ended up in a case that happened to ask you about that, because it's a major thing that was in multiple newspapers. So I would say just like make sure that you're skimming headlines, even if you don't have time to read through everything, so you can have a general sense of what's happening in the world.
That reminds me, before you go into the interview, good idea to Google that company and see, you know, are there any major news about the consulting company that you're about to interview? And definitely check the LinkedIn of the interviewer if you know their name, and then try to see if you can relate to any of their interests or past experiences. But that would help, you know, with kind of just building the human connection in an interview. And
Yeah, to your point, Livia. So one of my interviewers, I found out he like did the IB, which is like a equivalent of what's the AP levels, right? And I did the IB as well. So like I kind of like casually was like, oh, like did you like by any chance do IB? I was like, oh, how did you know? And then like to start a conversation about that. So that research does definitely help. Obviously, use it only in a good way, right? So to build connection.
And if you're interviewing for banking, I remember that they always love to ask, you know, what's the price of oil, what's the Dow Jones at, and what's our stock price at. So I always had to research those before going into those interviews.
Yeah, definitely prepare, you know, for the actual organization. Just try to learn a little bit about that place. So, you know, people always like to know that you've done some research and prep for it. That's important.
And sorry, I keep remembering things. So if you actually interview for a company, right, not necessarily in consulting, Harvard Business Review, you can actually buy a Harvard Business School case about that company. So let's say you're doing an interview for CVS, they have really good cases on that, and it will give you all of the history of the company and all sorts of interesting facts in just a few pages. So a good idea to get that. I don't know if Vassar has a subscription for it or if you can get these for free, but definitely a good resource.
In general, like in terms of preparation, I mean, there's different factors to consider, right? What you should be doing. One, you know, study casing. One, prepare for the behavioral aspect. So that's 2. 3, to Sam's point, you know, satisfy your intellectual curiosity. Read about the world, because you never know how that may help. And then 4, which I remember had a particularly hard time with, network. You know, it's something that we don't really necessarily learn at Vassar. And, you know, talk to alums. I mean, as you could, like, the fact that you guys are all here is already a big step. Don't be afraid to reach out, you know, ask questions. You know, obviously do your research in advance if you can. But that's another great way of figuring out whether it's the right fit for you, what you need to prepare for. And it's good to have this kind of guidance, especially because right now, like, especially in COVID, you don't know what's going to happen next. So having that kind of and learning the skill of networking as well is very important, because at the end of the day, we all want you to succeed, but to help you succeed, there needs to be some kind of back and forth communication. So
yeah,
I just found some. Go ahead, Steve.
I was going to say, as Aaron said at the beginning, you know, we have a gift, all of us at Vassar. We have such an amazingly loyal alumni group, and it's very deep and very wide. Reach out, find folks that are doing something that you might be excited about, and I guarantee you, they're going to love that you reach out, and they're going to take time to meet, to, you know, talk to you, maybe meet with you if it's not COVID, in person. And I mean, I love when people reach out, and I speak for, you know, almost every alum. So please, you should definitely network and do that. That's really important.
don't be scared. It took me forever to reach out to Steve. And Olivia, I remember reaching out to you, and you're like, busy. Like, hey, reach out to me in 2 months and we'll talk. And I was just too scared. 2 months later, I was like, oh, I think she forgot about me. So I never responded, which is incredibly stupid in hindsight. And just goes to show.
Actually, I was just going to tell them that I just found a message on LinkedIn from you from back in the day, and I was thinking, wow, like, and I actually talked.
And I remember like, it's like, oh, like in October, somebody talked to me, and by October rolled around, I was just fiddling my thumbs, like, I don't know, like, I think she forgot me. I'm not going to write to her. Like, don't worry about any of that. Like, it's just conversation. So sorry about that, Olivia.
Problem, you know, so what happens is that actually Strategian does not recruit at Vassar, and I asked them, they don't recruit at non-target schools at all. Maybe that will change. So we're pushing for that for sure, but you know, do what Nick did, and then, you know, definitely reach out to all of the alums, because they'll be able to help. And even if, you know, for example, if you want to reach out to me, you can, given that my company is not recruiting, you don't have to pitch yourself to me in a certain way. And I can help with honest advice and, you know, undecided career questions.
And by the way, just because a company doesn't recruit at Vassar does not mean you can't get a job there. You know, every one of these firms, in addition to their core schools that they recruit at, have a whole bucket, which is sort of expansion schools with just other great candidates at other schools. And they would love to sort of, you know, expand that. And I worked really hard at McKinsey to try to get Vassar into our core category. And I'm really excited. You know, we realized that with this year, there are 3 seniors that are going to be working full-time at McKinsey starting in the summer. It's the first time we recruited on campus, and we're now, you know, we go to very few liberal arts schools, Amherst, Williams. So excited. We're really excited about expanding our Vassar partnership, and we're going to start with juniors next year and seniors. So you guys are exactly at the right time, which is great.
To echo that, so a couple of things about going into consulting in slightly non-traditional ways, right? So at Deloitte, we also don't have a presence on Vassar's campus yet, but you just had a really, really big partner present here, right? And I think the way that you can kind of get around the fact that Vassar is not a recruit school is by getting a referral. And so being referred in by someone who is there at various levels is great. Being referred by someone who might be giving a presentation on future of work is really great. So that's like a very good person to reach out to right after and say, hey, that was great. Let's like build this relationship now. So when you're ready to apply, you can reach out and say, can you just like slide my resume in? And the answer is yeah, he can. The other thing that I would say is it's really important to think about your career in like a pretty broad sense, right? So I am 33 and I have at minimum another 33 years of working. And I say that because I'm much older than you guys, but I've had all of these different career changes. I worked in 2 different nonprofits. I worked at the World Bank. I worked at like a major consulting firm. So if you don't go into consulting right away, it doesn't mean that you won't go into consulting in your career. You have a lot of time to get into consulting. So if you decide like, I'm really conflicted, I just don't know if I want to go into consulting this year, or like, maybe I want to do something else, you can go into consulting right now and then leave consulting and come back, or just leave consulting and go do something else. You could go and like do anything in the world. You could become a pro golfer and then come into consulting later. Like whatever it is that you want to do, like consulting is a home that will always be there for you. So I think it's an important thing to kind of frame it with like, it is not the end all be all to go through and like get an offer immediately after college. If it doesn't work out, it's still a career path for you. It's still something you can come back to. There's still avenues to make it. I say that especially because like half of the people on this call got into consulting not straight out of college.
And just the correlate, and you know, that's 100% true. And if you do start out of college, you know, you could still do a million things. You know, I know at McKinsey, after 2 or 3 years out of college, some people love it and they say, hey, I want to stay, and they just stay forever or for a while. Many others say, you know what, I think I want to do other things. I want to do tech or private equity or nonprofit or 17 other things, and they do it, these great opportunities. And then another group of people after 2 or 3 years at McKinsey say, you know what, I think I want to go back to grad school. And many of these firms, including McKinsey, have this great program where we pay for you to go to grad school. We pay for both years of business school or all 3 years of law school, or whatever it is that you're excited about, as long as you come back for, you know, the number of years that you went to school, 2 or 3 years. And that's another great vehicle. So to Sam's point, if you start in consulting, that's great. You may stay or leave. But if you don't start in consulting for whatever reason, you could always come. It's a wonderful profession, period. More questions, thoughts? Again, anything.
Maybe we could talk a little bit about culture. I think that that's something that, like, sometimes people talk about it as work-life balance, sometimes people talk about it as culture, but I think that each firm has its own like kind of unique culture and they deal with work-life balance a little bit differently. So maybe we can start. Wadi, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Let's see. I think, like my perception of BCG is, I think it's exceptionally good, given that it's a, some 20,000 people global organization at being nimble and reinventing itself. I think part of that comes from sort of this organizational tradition of just being very introspective, right? I think I mentioned maybe a little earlier. I feel like, sometimes we're doing consulting on ourselves, right? We measure people's happiness. We measure how we can make work-life balance better, given the sort of inherently tough lifestyle that, sometimes the consulting work entails, right? In sort of situations where there's, potential controversies, like, we also talked about a little earlier, how do we hear people's voices? What's the framework that we use in terms of walking away from certain things, or giving at least a subset of people the option of walking away from certain things, right? So I think all of that I would probably just tie back to how much retrospect, and introspect we do, as a whole together. And I think perhaps that's sort of what we look for in terms of our people as well, right? In terms of being able to reflect on certain things and sort of generate sort of the next level understanding of, well, this is what I learned from this particular experience. And, this is what I would do to change it. And perhaps this can be applied to, other scenarios as well. So I would say overall, that would be maybe the first thing that I think, just off the top of my head, that sort of always strikes me, from my current employer, right? The other thing I want to mention is, I think the global reach of our organization is also a very, very incredible asset that I truly value, right? And I think that's very much weaved into our firm's culture. I think when I first started at BCG, because I come from a non-business background, right, I did sort of a 2-week boot camp in Boston, but with folks from all over the world, right? From Sweden, from China, from a lot of our global offices. So just sort of that pure opportunity to engage with people from all over the world, I think was incredibly valuable to me. And also, we have sort of structured programs where people can apply for opportunities to go abroad, sort of do sort of a rotation in a different geography of our footprint, and to sort of learn about the culture there, the best practices there. So I think that's a manifestation of that aspect as well. The last thing I want to mention is we do place a lot of emphasis on social impact. We have a dedicated social impact practice where we actually, do our consulting work with a lot of organizations in the social impact space. But we also sort of give people opportunities to do sort of what we call secondment, where BCG basically sends on BCG's payroll folks into other organizations and sort of embed in those organizations and do the jobs, right, as part of those organizations, and then come back to BCG, just bring basically, ideas and perspectives back, right? And I think that's also incredible. So I think overall, all of these dimensions are truly valuable cultural elements to me. And I think what I feel like we do really well is we have structural and corporate elements, right, that actually enable them and make them happen. And it's not just something that that's said a lot of times, but there's actually sort of real stuff happening. And I think that's, you know, my general impression so far.
And I would, I guess, just add a couple of things. In terms of culture, I hit on maybe three things briefly: mentorship, our training, and our global nature. So in terms of our culture, you know, we take our clients really seriously, and all of my colleagues here do. But what's really nice, and I think I probably speak for other firms too, is we don't take ourselves seriously at all. It's a very light culture. That humble and kind really comes out loud. In fact, you know, folks that are arrogant don't stay, don't last, which is really nice. And we try hard to sift them out away in the interview process. So it's a really great group of people that just have your back, that are just there to help you. And I find that that's so rewarding and so refreshing. In terms of the mentorship, you know, we don't make anything, and I don't think any of these firms do. All we do is attract amazing people like you and hopefully develop you to your full potential. So our entire ecosystem and our entire firm is built around apprenticeship and mentorship and feedback. You know, so one small example is, you know, we have, of course, on a regular basis, we give feedback, you know, and it's in Zoom right now. But I remember before we started, you know, in March, we stopped traveling. The very end of February, I was with our first year business analyst. So I'm like you, a couple of years, you know, just older, right out of school. And we went to a meeting, and then we left the meeting, and we're waiting on the platform in New York City, waiting for the subway to take us back to downtown to our office. And I turned to Julie, who was the business analyst, and I said, "Hey, I thought you were really great." And I gave examples of what you did at the meeting. And then I said, "But I thought you could have stepped in here." And I gave that example. And then she said, "Thanks, Steve, and you were pretty good, but you could have done this differently." And that epitomizes our firm, and I think it somewhat epitomizes our industry. Immediate feedback, both ways, to make each of us better at what we do, and totally non-hierarchical. It doesn't matter that I've been there forever and she's new. And that it's all for making us better and as we grow and learn and evolve. And that's why I think it's such a especially great place to start. Our training is, you know, we do formal training. When you first start, 2 or 3 weeks of intense training of everything from PowerPoint and Excel to some of the softer things to problem solving. Then every 12 to 18 months, you'll be sent somewhere around the world. And many of these firms are like this, where you get exposed to even more training for a couple of weeks of new things with other colleagues from around the world, which is really nice. And then, of course, there's all the informal training. And then lastly, the global thing, you know, we have about 130 some odd offices around the world, but we operate as one firm, and we really are proud of that. So if you were to literally physically walk into someone in any of our offices right now, well, they'll probably be closed, but if they're open, if in a post-COVID world, you physically bump into someone, I guarantee you there's a 25 to 30% chance that person is on a short-term transfer from another location. And we encourage that. So if you were to start in New York, and in a year say, "Hey, you know, I want to go to Sydney or Sao Paulo or San Francisco or Shanghai, SPNX, or Tel Aviv," you know, we make it happen. Because we want to create that one firm culture. It's really important, and it enables you to sort of see the world, which is really nice.
I echo everything that was said before. One thing that I would say is definitely talk to people from multiple firms to understand where you would better fit culturally if you have offers from multiple areas. And the second thing is consulting is up or out, at least strategy consulting. So every 2 to 3 years, you either progress to the next level, or sorry, that's my toddler making some noise in the background. Or you are helped by the firm to find another job. And what this means is that, you know, the best people stay and are advanced, and there's room for you to grow. And that, I believe, helps a lot with the culture. So it may seem scary at first, but it's not that bad. So I actually think it's a really great thing about the industry. I'm not aware of any other industry that functions this way.
Yeah, I'm gonna quickly just add a small thing, just because I echo what all the previous mentors have just said. One thing that, at least to me, or I guess two sides with something that really stood out to me at OW or Oliver Wyman. one is that people are quite entrepreneurial. There's a lot of emphasis on having people that take initiative, just because Oliver Wyman, relative to most of his competitors, is quite young. And because of that, we had to like adapt and punch up a lot. So having people to take initiative was very important. And like a lot of people from my star class, 2 years in, are like heads of like employee resource groups or taking pretty important roles within the firm to try to move it forward. And on the other hand, is very, very down to earth. Something that I actually last experience was at Vassar, right? You're around a lot of really, brilliant, unique people, and no one really rubs anything in your face. And that's something I experienced here as well. Like I was working with people, I enjoyed the company. And when you're like flying airport after client site, you talk about the personal life, and you just find out that they do so many amazing things, and I would have never been able to tell, which is great, at least in my perspective. And yeah, I think again, to Olivia's point, if you want to know about the different cultures, reach out to us, and we can talk about it probably for a lot longer period of time.
Yeah, and I'll maybe piggyback on just a couple of those points. I think, to Olivia's point about the up and out, it's, I think when you hear that, it's like, oh shit, like, or like, I'm gonna get fired, I'm gonna be like, and it's not I think what I actually really, really like about consulting is you are not competing against other people. It's not like if I get promoted, you don't. Like I have to like fight you back. It's you're competing against yourself. If you are performing and you are performing well, you get promoted. If you are performing and you're performing poorly, you get fired. And that has nothing to do with anyone around you. That's about you and your performance. And that's really important because it doesn't, I was really worried going into, like coming out of the public sector and going into consulting, that people were gonna like, it was gonna be very competitive and catty and gross. And that's not the case at all. Because this idea of having this collaborative culture, like if you have to work in teams, like they don't want you to want to like pull down your team members, they want you to build them up. And we spend a lot of time and a lot of money creating like these teams that function well together. And so like Nicholas said, like sometimes you're on a plane and you chat with each other, but at Deloitte, we also have a lot of investment in like team activities. Like we have this thing called Culture Cash, which is just like literally a pot of money to like hang out. We have like special Culture Cash that's like oriented towards DEI things. So that way you can hang out and focus on like inclusion focused topics. There's just a lot of emphasis on being good human beings. I think the other thing that, going back to Steve's point about kind of the feedback system, one of the things that Deloitte rolled out a while now, so maybe 4 years now, is a new performance management system. So in addition to the way that you get rated and promoted and given bonuses and stuff, there's also a formal feedback system that's built into our structure where every single 2 weeks, a minimum of every 2 weeks, you can do every week depending on what makes sense for your team, you are having a one-on-one with a supervisor. And so that could be whatever level you are, it's your supervisor. So it could be the person who's at the top of the project, the partner, or it could be anywhere in between. And that conversation is somewhat about like how you've been doing on the project, but a lot of it is about like how you are doing as a person. And so when I have these conversations with my team, I'm like, all right, so I know that you really want to go into like you're really interested in public health and you're really interested specifically in like disinformation and social media related to public health. That's super specific. How do we get you exposure to something that will help you like get closer towards that? And like, what are we doing in this project that's setting you up for success in that project? And like using that as a platform, it also is a place where we give feedback, but it's something where it's a little bit more about you as a comprehensive person. So I wanted to flag that because it's something that I didn't really realize. And then lastly, to Nick's point, the most amazing people that I have met in consulting have been the junior staff. So those are the people like straight out of college and straight out of graduate school, because they do crazy amazing things. These are the people who like build all of our coolest technology. They're the ones who like run all of our affinity groups. They're the ones who run like all of our mentorship programs. And sometimes they're like, hey, there's a problem over here. I decided to come up with a solution. Who's got funding for me and who's got like leadership support for me? And then they make it happen. So there's a lot of room for you to create, to figure out like where you want to play and to figure out how to get support to play wherever that is.
Great. I think we're gonna move to breakout groups. Before we do, I just want to thank each of you for being here. I hope we gave you some idea of what it's like, and hopefully maybe even inspired you around consulting.